These artists seek to be productive. They seek productive outcomes. It's not just about, representing problems or making the invisible visible or critiquing, the status quo. I think a lot of these artists are truly interested in coming up with and inventing new approaches, new platforms, new systems, so that people can re-engage with their own sense of agency over these issues. So many people feel, I think, completely, tied, their hands tied, because the issues are so complex and so big that they seem intractable. So a lot of these projects seek to unravel that and restore, an ordinary citizen's sense that they have agency over these issues.
It feels essential. The kind of work that I'm doing right now is it's not work that travels through the traditional gallery circuits, and it's like in a way when you're an artist you're also establishing you're not only needing to make the work, you're needing to also engineer the circuits of distribution of the work. That's challenging, so that feels again necessary to be building those kinds of communities and support group in a way that would enable those things to happen.
I found in performing the solo piece called Sugar a way of working with the personal story and the bigger or topical references. I knew the story circle form, that form in which people gathered in a circle can talk to each other more easily often about charged issues, and that work can be made out of that process, that performance work can be made out of that process. In general, I think that there is in our society a lot of shame around health, particularly around diabetes, since there's so many people who have it. When one talks in groups, one can share things and check them out. For me, dialogues with diabetics in particular help that. I've found ways of breaking through class and caste and other differences. You can take any subject that comes up in the work. Often subjects of politics and so forth come up in the work, and you can take any of those. You can take money, you can take status, you can take race, you can take all of those things and have the same conversations about social consciousness. Artists in Context has done what I think is part of its mission, and that is to connect the artist with the community organizations and the academic organizations. I think that is part of their mission of bringing these aspects together.
The Artists in Context One Book project asks communities, entire states in our case, to read a book. And there was a lot of discussion about what book it should be in the state of Maine, and there were a couple of really wonderful suggestions. But we felt that a Maine author was important. And Chris Thompson has just written a book called Felt, which is a conversation between the Dalai Lama and Joseph Beuys. And, one of Joseph Beuys's notions was that of being a social sculptor. And I think that fits very nicely into the Artists in Context idea of artists as social sculptors. And I think that a lot of the projects that they are supporting and the artists who have come forward through this initiative are engaging in that way. They're really changing our society. Hopefully in the best cases, and they're doing it through asking us to do some reflection, or through through a community action or through humor, often, which is always a wonderful way to engage with anybody. And they're forefronting social activism in a way that's really palatable and really welcoming, I think, by the broader community. And I think that's incredibly important, that we work in non-alienating ways and welcoming ways and open ways and connected ways.
I'm a physiological ecologist. I study trees and forests, and I study how they process and move water and carbon. So in broad terms, I'm an ecologist. And what we've been studying in the last few years is how a place like Boston works in terms of humans and the natural systems, the trees, the soils, the waterways, interacting with each other in good ways and in some ways that aren't so good or sustainable. And so I learned about Artists in Context in the context of the environmental health clinic that Natalie Jeremijenko had conceived of, and so that's how I kind of got involved with them. And what that project is trying to do is really to reach out to communities so that they have a voice in saying what the issues are that they perceive in terms of the environment in their urban neighborhoods and communities, and it provides a platform by which all of us can start to become more aware of how Boston works, what's working well, what needs to be focused on to make the environment better. It's a very rich area for research and outreach and awareness. And I think that Artists in Context has a vision that's very consistent with that. And so I've been very happy to work with them on these things. Artists in Context, to me, the context to me is meaning that that art has social meaning that can have positive impacts on communities. And I feel like science can and also should have some positive impacts on communities.
It basically has two components. One is that of a kind of learning network where we strive to assemble artists with other kinds of creative thinkers for them to be able to exchange information, talk about potential collaborative research projects, etc. And also work with artists who not only have accomplished a lot in the field, but other artists who are just beginning to think about a post-studio kind of practice and are interested in interdisciplinary conversations. So we offer programming to that creative network. And the other big piece of Artists in Context is the Artist Prospectus for the Nation. And it was Marie's brainstorm, and so she needs to talk a little bit about it.
We've been talking in these terms for about a year and a half about this endeavor of Artists in Context, and it's a prospectus. A prospectus tends to be in academia or in business circles. It tends to be an idea or a proposal for how to do something. And so we see the Artist Prospectus for the Nation as a compendium of ideas, ways of thinking that artists and other creative thinkers are proposing, have been proposing, to address important issues of the time in ways that are out of that kind of binary, butting heads way, and to really approach things much differently, and to give a general audience actually different ways to think about not only sort of global or national problems, but also individual problems and how they might not only think about them differently, but also behave around them differently.
Well, the most important thing about the $100 Bill Project and Operation Vader is it's not about me. And so it's a collective project. It's driven by a reality. It's compelled by reality that exists not only in New Orleans, but everywhere in the country, where there's high lead-in soils that endanger the development of children that grow up in this. And it's something that I felt needed to be attended to. And when I found that the situation was not being dealt with in New Orleans in an effective way, it became the goal to bring about a solution. I don't think any artist, or I really don't go about trying to solve problems, and I don't go around thinking that I'm going to change the world. But I do think that when you're confronted with situations like post-Katrina New Orleans and a pre-Katrina New Orleans that had this kind of threat in the soil, it compels you to think of something that might be a solution. It forces the parameters of your engagement to be not only poetic, but pragmatic. I think this is where artisan context fits in. It's understanding the poetry of what maybe the transformation of a city like New Orleans or Boston, for that matter, that might have the same problem, into a city that can rescue other places, you see. And so understanding the dynamics of not just it's a cool idea, but the pragmatic execution of it, and how important that poetry is to the project. There's a hard day I see, I think that's what I felt. And sometimes, you have to have a soul driving projects and being supportive of people all over the country. I guess that's what I feel about the people I've met with AIC. There's a